Hi everyone, I just wanted to have a video on structs in C++. What are structs and why do we want to use them? So basically a struct is a grouping together of variables for some purpose, right? And you basically want to be able to call a group of variables with just having one variable name that controls each one of them instead of having to pass all the individual variables in. So you want to just be able to send them all in one big struct. And the nice thing about structs is that the different variables inside the struct can be different data types. They don't all have to be the same data type. So we could do a similar thing using a multidimensional array. But the problem with a multidimensional array is that all of the different values have to be the same. So you can make a string multidimensional array, or you can make an int multidimensional array, or a float multidimensional array, but you cannot make one that can house both strings and floats and characters, but you can with a struct, and that's the benefit of using a struct. So this is the basic syntax. We use the keyword struct, and then we have a name that meets our naming convention. So in this case, I'm using struct name, and you know, so uppercase the second word, and uppercase the first word, and then unlike functions, there are no parentheses. We're not passing any variables into this. It's just calling it. And then you do use a curly braces to signify the start of the scope of the struct. You list out the members of the struct, and then you have the closed curly braces, and you end with a semicolon. So here's an example of how we can do it, and it's always easier to actually do these examples in an IDE. So we're going to start, I'm going to use CLion, and I just like starting with a program here and, you know, just executing it, making sure it runs and is happy as a clam. That's just a warm fuzzy that makes sure that we're on the same page. And the way you should be doing these things if you're going to create a struct is you should be putting it in a header file. You should be using headers and implementation files. So we're going to come in here and say we want a new source file, and I'm just going to call these struct, and I'm going to say create an associated header with it. This add to targets is going to actually put it into my make list file, which tells the IDE how to compile the code. And I'm going to hit OK. So you can see now I have my code here, that I have my files that are opened up for me. And now we're going to actually build our struct. And so you should be putting your struct inside your the header file inside your if and def and endif. Right? This is just because we're going to be calling the struct header file from both our main and our implementation file, so we need to make sure that if it's called multiple times, that it only defines the things once. So we're going to create a struct, and for us, we're just going to make a point system, and we're going to have an int x and a float y. And I like compiling just to make sure I'm going along and everything, and I didn't have any typos, because right, if I had forgotten a semicolon and I tried to compile, I would have gotten an error saying that it expected it. So that's just kind of why I like doing them as we go. And so we have this, and we're going to come back here to our main, and we're going to need to include our header here, or our header file. So we have a struct. And tab is a great thing that it completes for you. And we're going to just do standard cout, and we're going to just print out the struct. And we're going to make one, so it's going to be point key, and then we're going to set the values. And to access the values of the x and y, right? So these are values that are inside this struct. And I just made a point, a variable of point, and that means that I have x and y available to me. So to access them, I use the dot nomenclature. So it's just p.x is getting me to that the x variable, and I can set it equal to a value. So I'm going to set it equal to 10. And p.y, I'm going to set that equal to 10.5. This is a float. And so you can see I already have my variables. They're all set. I like to compile, make sure I didn't do anything wrong. Happy as a clam. I haven't actually printed my variables yet, so what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our implementation file, right? And we're going to have this be where we do our print. So we can just say void display point, and we're going to pass in the struct. So we can pass it in just like we pass in any variables that we would be doing. So right, it is a point p, and we have our curly braces, and we're going to just do a print for it. So standard cout, and we're going to say p.x equals p.x, and put in a tab in here. p.y equals p.y, and addendum. And you can see I'm having some errors, and that's because I don't have included all my libraries. So we're going to include IOStream. And I also need to, if I have an implementation file, I need to go over to my my header file, and I need to create a prototype of my function so that I can call it and have it in a different order. So now I can come back here and I can print. So I can display my point, and I just passed in my point, and we'll compile and execute this, and hopefully we'll get our point printed out. And look at that, we have our point printed out. Very nice. So that is, and you could be thinking like, that is printing out one struct, right? You could be thinking about like, well, I could just easily just assign int x and int y, and that would be a lot easier. What comes in easy for this now is if we wanted to do arrays. So if I was going to make arrays, like if I needed a lot of x and y's, right, not just one set, but a lot of them, I'd want to make arrays. And if you were going to go and just make arrays of x and arrays of y, then that takes a lot of, and like passing this around and everything can be challenging. Whereas if you have a struct of it, we can just do point, and we'll just do point, and we'll have make it an array, and we'll say I have 5 of them, right? And we could just set those values if we wanted to. We can set them here. And so we're going to just give them different values. And I'm just going to copy this and make duplicates and make our life, my life a little easier when we're Right, so we have our 5 values, and we can change these numbers. Right. And we can go through our loop here. And display point P. But this time, since we are actually passing in a variable, right, we need to actually pass in, it's point PONT, right, because we want to pass in the array of variables. And we're going to take this display just so that we can easily distinguish where we're printing the array of structs. So now you can see here I'm printing out the array of structs. So I get to see all of them that I have in my array. And so it's an easier process, right, of being able to do stuff with these arrays and being able to have values in them. So I showed you a couple ways to, like, this is manually adding values to your structs. This is still manually adding them. And we passed it here. If we wanted to change how our display was, we could kind of duplicate this, right? If we wanted to make it so that we didn't have to do our for loop outside of it, we can do a for loop in here. I'll do size and I++. I'm going to have to pass in size. And we're going to pass in now an array of these variables. Int size. And we can just change all of these pointers, right, to our array. So it's just doing the same that we normally would do for an array. I'm just going to come in here and copy this, and come over here and paste it. Does that not work? There we go. It's trying to be too helpful for me. And so now we have the display point. The only thing I need to do is make sure I add this also to my prototypes, right? And then I can call it in my main. So I have my display here, and if I don't want to do it that way, I can display this. And we're going to just have this be 5, right? That's how big it is. And we're sending it the structs that we made, right? So we're just sending the array of structs that we have, that there's 5 elements in it, and we will comment this out. I like this feature of CLion. Control Shift and the / will automatically comment that out. And now when we execute this, oh, see, typos. Semicolon. And execute it, we get the same display, right? But now we're displaying each of our element that we're in, so you can see us cycle through all the elements in our arrays. So that's fairly straightforward, easy way to handle structs. If we wanted to, we could add to our struct trait. We could add a string s to our struct. And we could set values to it as well. It will work with anything. So hopefully. So if we come back to our main, and we just do here, right, p.s equals hi. You could add, right, so it could be an array. The struct can be of integers and floats and strings, characters. You could have it all be the same. You could have them all be different. It's kind of the benefit of having these data structures. So that is structs in a nutshell for C++ using CLion. Happy coding, everyone.